right, so we've got a few more folks coming on, and to honor everybody's time, we can just get started. This is a privacy exchange community presentation in conjunction with Ketch. And if you're not familiar, Ketch is a data privacy management software platform. And I think a lot of us, if we work in privacy, have either worked with Ketch or we've seen Ketch, either on LinkedIn or at um, conferences and so on. And the goal here today is really to go below the surface of simply the logo or, like the branding that you might have seen to really like understand the tool. And to give you, some background of like why us, why Jasmine and Doug to present this, just I'll give you a brief introduction. I am an attorney, a certified privacy professional with SIP US, SIP M, and most recently a fellow in information privacy designation, and experience in state, global, and federal privacy. I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the public sector, and I'm also more recently an AI governance leader. And ultimately, most of all, and the reason why I'm here, and I think the reason why most folks are here, is curiosity. I've been very curious about what differentiates the various privacy tools. I think we all know that it's the world of only having one trust as an option. Those days are far behind us. Now there's a lot of options. And Doug here is a solutions engineer at Ketch. He works every day with mid-market and enterprise privacy teams. So he's worked with, teams of different sizes, and he really is a partner who evaluates what people need, what organizations need to fit their specific kind of footprint in a very customized way. And before he was at Ketch, he was has a long career in the data privacy SaaS space with a prior role at DataGrail. He's, as you can guess from his experiences, he's got a lot of hands-on experience in this area and can share with us what he knows about Ketch. So thanks everyone again for joining us today. We've got a 45-minute program here, and we will be answering a lot of questions, asking a lot of questions, and then at the end, if you have more questions that haven't been answered, we can link you up with Ketch directly so that they can take you deeper. And so as a reminder, even though I'm a lawyer and probably a lot of people on the call are lawyers, or a lawyer, or you hate a lawyer, this is not legal advice. I'm not your lawyer, and this information is something that you can use, for informational purposes. But really, if you have a legal issue, see a lawyer, and don't count on this or ChatGPT to be your lawyer. Okay, so let's hop in. We can pop right into our presentation. I'll give Doug just a minute to share anything that I might have missed.
No, thank you very much. This is great. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so the thing that I think a lot of people who work in privacy struggle with is that we know the names of the various privacy tools, and we've come across them, or they're sales folks, but we really haven't gotten to be under the hood of the tool unless we've actually used it in a prior role. And so when we're in a position of trying to select the right privacy tool, or even just like, make a recommendation as to what's good out there in the market, we don't always have all the information that we would like. And so that's where we are today. We're going to just dig right into Ketch. As you can see, Doug is sharing his screen, and he's going to take us through the various parts of the tool. And we're going to go over a few different areas. And so let's jump right in. Okay, so let's start off with first things first. Let's imagine that my team has evaluated all the options. They've decided on Ketch. And how long would it take for Ketch to become, from signing on the dotted line to getting up and running?
Yeah, from a if we focus on consent, for example, we would typically schedule 6 weeks of calls. After the second or third call, typically we don't know what we're going to talk about. It's really like if I control everything from the website to the tag manager, um, I put some code on the website in order to, put the catch banner there. It's about 30 minutes, from
Okay.
A to Z. I am an expert in the product. Like that is not what we expect customers to be able to implement, but it's very quick and from a complexity perspective, subject rights requests, those workflows can be very simple. They can be very complex. So that may take a few more weeks. And typically, this is something we're supporting with people in the right time zones. We have support teams in EMEA. We also have people on various parts of the United States. And so um, these are privacy experts in that context, and they do this day in and day out. So I show the product, but I always defer to them, and we often bring them in as part of the conversation or advisement as part of the sales process to make sure that we're not, you know, missing anything from their experience as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like you really get to know the organization in this portion, and you've got a team that, they're not just like customer success folks. They're really like privacy. They're privacy savvy. They know about privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. These are, people who've been with, Ketch for, I think the average tenure for that team is 4 years now. And so, this is people who are not just straight out of college doing their first job. They've worked together across typically three companies now. And so like there's a lot of collaboration and trust across that team. And, certainly people have different expertise in that team, but they all do come together and, you know, we solve problems quickly when they arise.
So also it sounds like your team has experience with a lot of different industries. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we run the gamut of, we have a catch free offering, for example. So if you want to put the catch tag on the site, keep the traffic under 5,000 uniques, like that will sit and persist. And that is just kind of a product-led growth uh, tool, but it is a way to explore it. So we have some customers who come in that and we've never talked to them. There's a rock and gem shop in Oregon that put it on and went with the defaults and went through the checklist.
Mhm.
And then we get to, very large organizations, global. Hearst Publishing, for example, is one of our customers, Time Magazine. Um, those are categories or businesses that really depend on advertising and,
Mhm.
the impact of privacy plus advertising and not messing that up is, very costly in terms of, getting it wrong. And so um, the executive team here at Catch came from the marketing space, marketing tech, um, had a company that was acquired by Salesforce and they basically were turned to by Mark Benioff to say, go figure out this GDPR thing. And that was, their first deployment of what in essence became the idea behind Catch.
Interesting. Yeah, I that makes me think about the fact that California has recently had several enforcement actions revolving around tracking technologies and the ability to opt out or the ability to, um, it's very important for organizations to have a handle on that. So it's great that Catch, has that marketplace expertise around digital advertising of like how it can be useful and also how to honor privacy around that modality.
Yeah, and the configuration of that in the context of Catch, when we're talking about the various privacy protocols and what gets on the screen, is just very straightforward. So, from that perspective, it's a configuration inside of the application. I'm happy to
Mhm.
show it here as well.
Sure.
In terms of, from a conversation perspective, if people want to actually go through and, turn on the GPC string or IAB
Mhm.
inside of California, that is done not with an engineer, not with somebody who's going to have to maintain that. We're just defining, in this case, for example, we're going to go through and show the IAB string in California, pick a jurisdiction, and then we start mapping purposes over. And like that's
Okay.
what's involved. And then 20 minutes later, it's live on the site. So
Okay.
not difficult.
Now, can folks customize what comes up on that on those pop-up boxes?
Yeah, there are over 400 different configuration options, I think, when I last did the math.
Mhm.
And, from that perspective, I've got a sample website here, for example. I'm based here in California,
Mhm.
so I have the purposes associated with that region. If I wanted to go through and show, for example, have a button to re-invoke consent, we could do that. Also, from the perspective of, footers do not sell or share links.
Mhm.
We also have, privacy center. So if I'll accept all the traffic here, and
Mhm.
that'll make sense in a second. Um, all of this is separated in two different layers. So there's the look and feel, which is really the time saver. None of our customers
Mhm.
have spare engineering talent. So we have a way to change the logo, change the footer, get rid of the powered by Ketch. Um, and then also go through and change, the wording. So if you can modify a Google Doc, like you can edit Ketch.
That's great. Yeah, that's exactly one of the pain points that I've seen in organizations. Either the organization wants to put their branding on the banner. That's one thing. So, it sounds like that's pretty easy to do. And then secondly, let's say that a customer is on the site, they make a privacy choice, they later on decide, oh, well, I don't want that. I actually don't want cookies. And it's very easy to go over and change that preference. And then to your point about engineering, like, yeah, a lot of privacy teams are not engineering heavy. And so they're folks that know privacy very well, but they're not like able to do some of the changes on their own if it's not something like this that's like designed towards non-technical folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, related to that is the ability to go through and, if we move beyond the look and feel of it, being able to know what the user did. So even if they don't necessarily remember how to click on that button,
Mhm.
we still have an obligation to honor their requests. They reach out to the support team and say, hey, I want to be opted out. Like I would challenge anybody looking at a privacy tool to ask the vendors how to do that. Like if some of these solutions are serving and maintaining their consent on the client side, meaning like in your browser, there's nothing happening on the server side. So for the technologists on the call, like they'll respect that. Ketch is doing things both, in terms of on the client side, but also on server side. And I can show an example of that. But, from a
Mhm.
regulatory perspective, from a SIPA, excuse me, from also like plaintiffs' attorneys, SIPA, like looking at this, people are scanning websites. Nobody's getting in trouble. At least I'm not an attorney, but like I don't see a lot of enforcement actions in California for not having the right data map or not having the right assessment. It is like how you're presenting yourself out to the world. And so if we go through and make a change here, we turn off target advertising, click save. We've
Mhm.
honored that. Um, on the back end, I've already set this up in the background, but I've got a variety of identifiers here. So anything that you set on your website, Ketch could be configured with. So in this case, I'm looking at from a segment ID. So somebody set up a Twilio segment on the website. Ketch in that first party, really from a first principle, knows these identifiers. We're serving the website from your website. So it's not a form that we're hosting.
Mhm.
Therefore, we can grab those identifiers, understand it, and then the power of this, though, is also that on the back end, when I say, hey, opt me out, we can reach into Adobe Marketo. We can reach into Amplitude. Server side immediately say, hey, Doug has said no to, in this case, target advertising. Um,
Mhm.
and reach into that segment. And what's happening there in the background, if we look at this, is I have the segment system within a second. And this is a lot of code, but the key thing here is that I've said opt out to target
Mhm.
advertising here. And so that immediately gets into the system, and downstream systems could comply with that as well. So that's one of the really powerful pieces of Ketch.
Yeah, that's great. And also when I'm looking at your interface, it is really easy to tell what type of trackers are in each category, which is really nice because I've seen other tools where it's like you kind of they're not so neatly laid out to correspond with each of the categories.
Yeah, no, that's a good segue in terms of like thinking about this from a tracker's perspective. So
Hmm.
Ketch will set 5 lines of JavaScript on the header of your website. That defines the Ketch organization. and then what specific website we're looking at. So, we're not charging based on the typical sort of number of websites. It's literally just, in the case of consent, it's traffic. And so the advantage there is we have some customers who have 1,000 websites. So if you need to make a change to one of them, in some systems, like that can take engineers days, and you just hope
Mhm.
it works right. With Ketch, it's really pretty straightforward. But in terms of the categorization, there's a couple different approaches. So we're looking at it from the perspective of we will go through and scan the website, identify and categorize the trackers. At that point, we need to map those over to purposes. And so we have an abstraction of Ketch may decide that this is ad motivated tracking, and that could be personalization or target advertising. We have the ability to block cookies as or trackers as they're discovered. Um, but at that point, if we do have a couple different purposes or uses for segment, in this case, I could turn one of them off and again, like only fire that for certain instances. And so you can see the instances where it's located. We've auto assigned this to a category. And so all you're doing is having to map that purpose one time, and
Mhm.
you can go through and leverage that again and again. So, in full disclosure, the things that we have a hard time with are the first party cookies that customers are creating, like technology companies who are tracking users using a logged in user. We might not have seen that before. So
Yeah.
you go through and update that.
So it sounds, looking at this, it looks like you have like an internal glossary of the various trackers, and you've done the work, Ketch has done the work of mapping out what each of them does. Because this has been a pain point in organizations where I've worked, where like you can see the name of the tracking technology, but you don't know what it is. So then you have to go to like a separate window, and, like look up what it is and identify it. But here you've got that all in one place, which is looks really convenient.
100%. Yeah. So we have about four different passes that happen against the data. One of them, that is subtle but very powerful is we use DuckDuckGo, and we've licensed that technology. Like they're great at, as a browser level, to block that. So we're using that same technology to understand what it is and put it in the right category.
That's great because I always say that privacy is a sales feature. It's something that causes customers to trust your organization, and DuckDuckGo has such a great reputation for privacy. If you can, let your customers know, hey, well, like, we're using some of that technology. I think you just increase trust and, potentially could drive some sales from that point.
But yeah, 100%. I think it's, the combination of both privacy conscious people plus, technology adept to know that there's alternative browsers to Chrome and,
Mhm.
the defaults out of the box. And so, one thing we can also do is go through and we have the ability to continually scan this. And so, if new trackers are identified, like you're going to find these in this context,
Mhm.
and, these are the ones that come through. This is something that what happens, whether you're disclosing them or blocking is completely up to you. And, we have opinions on how that should work, but it's a flexible tool. Like I think one of the reasons I joined Ketch is for any certain implementation, like if we talk about tag managers, like Google Tag Managers, like we have four different ways we can configure that. So the largest of the largest organizations use like a 360 option from Google. That's a completely different beast than, the mom and pop rock and jewel store that just wants to click a button and synchronize with it. So again, depending on what you bring to the table working with Ketch, this is often, the conversation of we have to do it three or four ways, even for some organizations, because they've just got acquisitions or different teams are managing things in different ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In this environment, like an organization may purchase another organization, and then like getting that into compliance is another big pain point. And so that does bring me to our second question. This is something that our community also was interested in knowing, which is around manual pre-work. Like before an organization comes to the table with Ketch, is there stuff that they should like have already organized that they can be ready to go with you?
Yeah, when we onboard, we typically provide a set of steps. When you get into the documentation, it's pretty straightforward, but number one, know the technical teams, and I don't think this is specific to Catch, but like know the teams that are going to have to be involved. So if we're talking about consent, who can actually touch the website? Who owns the tag manager? Um,
Hmm.
we had Butterball Turkey come to us 2 days before Thanksgiving and say, we need a new consent solution. And so they moved very fast. They brought everybody to the phone call, and within about 3 hours, it was stood up and ready for Thanksgiving. Um, that's rare, like more often than not, it's like I will sign this contract and then I'm gonna go figure out who can, you know, export and put this code onto the website.
That's right.
And then, I'm gonna go through and figure out from a tag manager perspective who owns this and what our approach is going to be. Like that's the pre-work that I think is worth doing.
Mhm.
One thing that hasn't been covered, a lot in the marketplace though also is a product that we call Data Sentry. And
Mhm.
this is pre-work that I think can inform, you know, data mapping. It can also inform from a risk perspective, assessments that need to go into place. It can also just let you know where you're at today from a consent disclosure perspective. So using the same technologies that we go through and find those trackers, we're leveraging on a network perspective. We're crawling and assessing websites. And so this is something that could be
Mhm.
set up independent of the consent solution. And
Mhm.
you can see here things that are like risks. So GPC is not currently being honored. There's sensitive data. And to tell a quick story with this, we have some customers who have already deployed this. They're using it. And we had one company that, not to get too specific, but they're in the healthcare business, so sensitive data applies, and they got pretty upset with us because we went to the trackers, and you can see a list of trackers that were there. You can see the lineages. So my data was part of Blue Cross Blue Shield, leak, which was Google Tag Manager configured with Google Analytics, which went into Google Ads. So anything I
Mhm.
searched on that knowledge library, they now know about. But
Yeah.
this is sort of like lineage that would find it. But the customer came to us and said, we see a Temu tracker and it did identity synchronization. And like, we're confident we never put that on the website. Uh,
Mhm.
our engineering team got on a phone call and said, these are the technologies that have online identifiers being shared. Let's jump into it, take a look.
Mhm.
And we have the collection details. And sure enough, there was one collection event where that data was synchronized with Temu off of the piggybacking ad network, and they never
Mhm.
saw it again. Um, the lawyers got extremely scared. The technologists had a lot of work to figure out why that ad network deployed it. But this is the sort of data that we can get, and this is again completely independent from a perspective of any sort of talking to an engineer. Like we need to have
Mhm.
a list of URLs, or ideally the tag inside of the head of the website.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with the current climate within organizations, there's been a lot of turnover, there's been layoffs, there's been, staffing changes and so on. And sometimes the uh institutional knowledge or like the organizational knowledge is lost. And so to have something that's really objective and can tell you what you have and what potential risks you have, I think is really useful.
Yeah, plaintiffs' attorneys have this sort of technology. Like regulators are looking at this level into websites, like how you're presenting yourself to the world is now, part of the regulatory framework and the litigation framework. So we wanted to provide a technology that would at least level that playing field and give you the
Yeah,
ability to say, hey, this sort of data's out there. Who
yeah.
is piggybacking? Who don't you know is on your website that's actually, trackers are great, but underneath that trackers, whether you're talking cookies, pixels, like the sole purpose of that is to transfer data to that server. And so like that's how Ketch thinks about this from a technology perspective is it is gathering data. You should know about that and
Mhm.
like make informed decisions about whether or not it should be there, you know, disclosing it, removing it, cleaning it up, rescanning, this is all parts
Mhm.
of the workflows that we support. So
That's great. Okay, so we've talked about some pain points, with a focus around tracking technologies, but what are some other pain points that you've seen customers have in the privacy space?
Yeah, when we talk about onboarding subject rights request, often one of the challenges specifically around the workflows that are going to happen. So, in California, an employee exercises their access request, like, is that pending litigation? Like, should that go to a different team? Do I forward that to you, Jasmine, or should I let my analyst handle it and
Mhm.
fully automate it? Thinking through that, and for companies who have not gone through that exercise, and I'm flipping through some screens, but the idea here, want to get to an example of one of these. And so underlying catch, you can go through and have workflows associated with this. So anything on the form that you fill out can impact the workflow. We can go through and do identity verification.
Mhm.
The hardest pain point, though, is when companies are like, we haven't done this before, and suddenly we're on delete me's list, and we're getting thousands of these, and the clock has
Mhm.
started, right? Um, so there's APIs underneath all of this, and I think it's a crawl, walk, run, which is like for some of our customers that low volume, you can have an inbox and it will go through and do ID verification. And maybe today you've got a Jira-like process to go to Mark and ask for anything, in this database. And we talk to Mary and we go through and, click the opt-out button inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. If you want to maintain that workflow, like we have ways to have tasks and you can contact a person and give them a certain number of days to do it. We also have full automation. So if you want to go through and delete data in HubSpot and then delete it inside of Snowflake, those are two different connections. You know, the order of operations matter there too, though. You don't want to go through and have data going from HubSpot into Snowflake. If you delete it from Snowflake first, it's still going to continue to be inside of your data lake. And so the order of
Mhm.
operation there also matters a lot.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you can, a customer could use this map to identify what they need to do internally, like using a Jira process or some other kind, Snow or some other kind of ticketing process internally, or they could fully, I guess the word I would use is automate it with Ketch and like allow Ketch the access to delete items or to like pull out data to respond to the DSAR request. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Like we have one customer who I won't name specifically, but like they started out with a more manual process, and this is tens of thousands of requests each month. And over the course of the year, as engineering teams had time to, connect a database, build a webhook endpoint, um, get us access into the Shopify instance, like we were able to get to 98% automation. And so like they reduced the number of people on that team processing those DSARs and let, that analyst do something else. And so you don't have to start out with full automation. You don't have to get to full automation.
Mhm.
We would love it, but often it's like, hey, this week we're going to I want to get Marketing Cloud stood up. And so great, let's turn that on, click save. Like we have the full version control behind this. We know, hey, when this request came in a week ago, Salesforce Marketing Cloud wasn't automated. That was a person and it went to this step, and
Mhm.
we have that full trail and associated with it, and we can tell you everything that happened. So it's an evolution. I think that's probably the most critical part on the subject rights request in terms of the pain points. In terms of other parts of the product, like the consent is it's fast, it works. I think the one pain point I see for sometimes people who are in the advertising space or advertising related revenues, if you're going from no consent solution to a consented environment, like there will be a drop off in revenue. And so we see some customers who are like, I just want the revenue to be the same or better. Like that, that's just not how the internet is going to work. That's not how users work. And so like there is a change event and we have to acknowledge this. Let's just make sure that
Mhm.
it's served fast. It happens, immediately when the website loads. It's respecting TCF strings GPP. Like you're not having a race condition and having the ads fire before users had a consent choice made. Like that is extremely powerful, but also sometimes a difficult conversation with the customer to say you are going to see a fall off, but you're now compliant. So like that's the risk that you're running of not having anything on the website when you're serving ads.
Yeah, I mean that really gets to a central tension that a lot of privacy folks face, which is that some of the things that privacy folks will need to do to get into compliance might affect other teams. And it's helpful when a privacy expert can come to the table and say, "Hey, look, here's the risk that we have. Here's how we want to reduce it. And yes, maybe it's going to affect revenues on this side, but then on the other side, maybe you're reducing risk by a lot and like reducing the reputational harm from having a regulator come after you or like, facing, a lawsuit or something like that. So I think that's really important from an education standpoint, like enterprise wide.
Yeah, and given our team's background in advertising and marketing technology, like one of the things that we've found and we're able to help the privacy and legal experts have this conversation with the marketing teams is, if you're wasting your money and like, we have connections into Facebook, for example. So if I go back to that audit log, I can show you instances where like when a user says no to targeted advertising, it's not sufficient just to set that inside of the consent browser. Like you're honoring that choice and Ketch can absolutely do that. I won't demonstrate it just in the interest of time, but like if you want to see it, reach out, we'll show you. You also need to go in and take care of that ad network, remove that person from that audience. Like that's very hard to do if you haven't said anything on the server side or you're not interacting with that. You're also wasting money. Like
Mhm.
you've got a person who said, I don't want to be part of your advertising, and you're spending $5 or $1 to serve them an ad. Like that is advertising saved. Like how much money are you spending on advertising? Let's remove those people from the audience. Congratulations. Like you've now just paid for your consent solution. And that twist of thinking through it logically and saying, yes, we're going to remove that audience size, but like there's real dollars that are spent on those advertising networks. Like let's just pull that out. And so again, it's the right audience and it has to be the right conversation in terms of like how much they're spending on advertising or how they're using those technologies. But like Ketch does have the ability in the context of a subject rights request workflow or in the context of a do not sell or share workflow. This is the sort of thing that we can do is just to go through and say, hey, we're going to set permits. And so, if we go through and somebody opts out, great. Like essential is going to be maintained. Somebody fills out the form. On the back end, the consent solution is going to do that. But if we go back to what we talked about earlier, where we need to remove this person from segment, we need to have the advertising networks. All of that is automated through what we call orchestration as well. So,
Well, that's great. Yeah, automation is really a key word that, I mean, we got to use it in our lives, but then in terms of senior leaders, it's something that they're looking for. They're really looking to see, hey, is your team being efficient? Are you using automation appropriately and where possible to get a good result that gets the job done with less money? And it's helpful that you have designed a tool that really leverages that ability to, let a small team make a big impact.
yeah, and move from, the people who frankly see you coming down the hall and run away to somebody who's actually like welcome seat at the table and is
That's
trying to
right.
keep
Yeah.
people out of trouble, right? So
Yeah, yeah, we want to be partners, we want to be partners with the business. So um that's really important. So we're good on time. I have another question that we had talked about. We touched upon a little bit, which was the um data subject rights, and I think you mostly answered this, but uh there's two kind of ways that you can use it. One is to track incoming requests and verify the email address and then make sure that you action it within regulatory timeframes.
yeah.
And then the other way of using it is like a more automated way where Ketch could do the whole process.
Yeah, and gradients throughout that. So I want to automate these two systems.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just get something that's so core to your business, like you still want to have a person in the loop. That's great. Or we, in terms of automation, let's say it's a database, like we have a container that could be set up in your environments. You need to have somebody who knows how to configure Kubernetes in order to do that. Maybe you don't have that. That's okay. Like, can somebody write a webhook that we could reach into? And access it that way. So like there's different abstractions. If not, like you can reach out to the database team and send them, a ticket or an email and flow it through that way. So those are all configuration options, and it it should evolve over time. It should get better. Your systems are going to change. We'll see a change on Data Century and know that the marketing team has a new technology or a new advertising network that we have to go through and, include in that removal workflow. So um, there is kind of a virtuous cycle across the components of Ketch, and they're all deeply integrated. If I set up segment for consent and I need to use it for, rights, like I'm not reinstalling that. I'm not asking for the same different set of keys. It is, just it's there and available and drag and drop. So.
That's great. And then one area that we had touched upon earlier was around multitasking and Catch as a potential multitasking tool. In organizations where I've worked, like software is a big, it can be a benefit, it can be a pain point, and senior leaders are looking at budgets, even more closely than before, and software is not cheap.
Yeah.
So what I think can help privacy teams is when you can onboard a tool and tell other teams, hey, we've got this tool, we primarily use it for privacy, but here's how your team can use it. Can you give us any examples of how Catch can do that?
Yeah, so I would say the data century, which we talked about, is definitely one of those that has, security implications. It is framed from the lens of privacy,
Mhm.
but sharing that data with other teams has been incredibly helpful from an engineering perspective. We've had customers say, "We know we've removed Facebook everywhere, but you found the tracking pixel that on a certain URLs that we didn't know about was still there," and that is an aid to the engineering teams and allows for an easier conversation of like a data-driven conversation of saying, well, like, why is this here? We know it's here. And, you know, privacy professionals who aren't technologists, like, that's a difficult, you know, conversation to have with engineering if you don't have that data. And so I think that
Right, right, yes.
that is like you can give them access to Catch and say, here's the data, and you think you've cleaned it up, we'll rescan it and like let's see what we got. We're not charging for users. Like if you want to bring in your outside counsel, like we've had plaintiffs' attorneys reach out for demand letters, and we show that audited log, an audited or a redacted version of that audit log, and say, this is the level of detail that we have. Send directions of how to retrieve the catch ID or whatever you're using for the identifiers on the website, and like that's we'll create it once with you, and then you'll have that in your back pocket. But a lot of those plaintiffs' attorneys don't respond; they go away, and so like the assessments, like we can do third-party risk assessments, like that's available. That's configuration of just simple templates. And ultimately, though, the data mapping exists as well, classification off of data. Again, that's kind of an overlap from a security slash kind of like IT need as well. And so I'd say that those are the primaries. The other piece that I think a lot of our customers are leveraging also though is like mobile consent and starting to think of that and unify it in the world of, we do have SDKs that are very quick and are easy to maintain. We're not versioning these and requiring your engineering teams to reinstall every 2 weeks or something like other companies are. And so while that's not necessarily a removal of another tool, it is like, I think an environment where there hasn't been a lot of enforcement, so people are not thinking about like consent in the context of mobile and how that's being played out. And so it is something that is a good focus of Ketch and something we excel at as well.
That's a really important point you made, particularly around I forgot the term you used, but like third party vendor management is what I've seen it called. And tracking what vendors you have, identifying them not only as sub-processors, because that's something that you have to do under a lot of these privacy laws, but then also understanding what their security posture might be, like using that list as a way to say, okay, are we dealing with vendors who have good security practices? And that's been really important, not just from a regulatory standpoint, but like just to protect your organization from cyber attacks. The vendor can be like, the weak point where your organization could be vulnerable because of a vendor not having good security practices.
Yeah, and I think, we're seeing that against some very public companies in the last 2 weeks of news where, I worked at Salesforce for 5 years. It sounds like there's some discussion of people were socially engineered to install a bad version of a pretty common loading application, and like your CRM is out, data is out into the world. Like that's terrifying. Um,
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with the software, but like it is a risk of, the ways that people can configure those solutions. And so like on a system basis, like, you can gather information, um, categorize the data automatically,
Hmm.
integrate with kick off a risk assessment, where the data residency is, etc. Um, so there's a lot of information in the context here. Again, this is a connection. We use this for rights orchestration. If we wanted to use it for, another purpose, we could do that as well. But, this is the sort of
So
additional
is
piece.
is are these details about the vendor things that Ketch has in its database, or is this something that the customer talks to Acquiesce as, oh, like, what are your practices around this? Or like, is the customer filling this out manually, or is this something that Ketch already has?
Ketch already has this.
Okay.
That said, if you did want to go through and supplement it, for example, you can
Hmm.
always go through and say, we have criminal data inside of that, like save it off. Like there are ways you can append it, make it more specific to your use case. So if you're using SurveyMonkey for, HR, violations or something like that, like that's
Hmm.
going to have some different category of data and you'd want to update it here. But
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
the mainstream use of these applications, like the schemas are the schemas, and, you can only do so many things inside of Calendly or Loom. Like they
Hmm.
have your email address, they have certain types of data. Their servers are located where they're at. This is, um, fortunately, in terms of this space, like that is not a highly evolving from a day-to-day basis. Like maybe as AI makes a lot of these decisions and people get more creative about how they're coding applications, like that's going to move faster. And, we have different approaches we can use. Synthetic subject rights requests that we send through and figure out who
Hmm.
vendors are, look at their DPAs, look at, privacy policies, look at the
So
underlying connections of the APIs of like what's possible inside the system as well. So
yeah, that's really important, and that does lead me to my last question. I know we're wrapping up on time, but is this something that you can use to uh, track uh, DPA's data processing addendums? Like, I want to make sure that all my vendors have the most recent data processing addendum and have signed it. Can I use this tool to like make sure, like almost like a list to make sure that I've done that with all my vendors?
yeah, that's one of the categories inside of the processing activities fields. You could also include that as part of a survey that you're sending directly out to them and like
Okay.
maintain and centralize those responses. There's a couple
Yeah,
of
that's great.
workflows that could get there. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. This has been super informative. You're obviously very knowledgeable about the product, and I love that the people who built this and your whole team like are very experienced in privacy and a lot of these tracking technologies and things. So you're coming at it with a level of expertise that it sounds like would be a huge benefit to your customers. So thanks for sharing that with us, and with that, if you have any closing words, Doug, I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah. What I will offer up to members of the Privacy Exchange is I am a member, so you can find me there on Slack. If anybody wants to see their data, like a couple of sample URLs, I'll stand up instances of Data Sentry, um, of course, with your permission and show it back to you. I'm going to be out next week, so, contact me. It might take me a week to get through it. The other is if you want to see Ketch, look at the documentation, etc. Like Ketch Free has a lot of capabilities, and if I can be of assistance to anyone, please just reach out. So
Awesome. Thank you. Well, this was great. Thank you, Privacy Exchange community folks. Please look out for a post-event survey, and we hope to see you at our next event.
thank you.
All right. Thanks.